Hello everyone, welcome back to the Rasa Masterclass. In this episode, we will start building our custom contextual AI assistant and master the fundamentals of creating the training examples for the NLU model. Let's get started. First, let's talk about what are we building. At this moment, the most common use cases for AI assistants that we see are in the fields like customer support, internal processes like IT help desk, HR, recruitment, all across different domains like finance, banking, healthcare, etc. Healthcare in particular is a very interesting and emerging market when it comes to AI applications, and that's why the assistant that we are building will be in healthcare domain too. We are building an assistant which will allow users to search for hospitals, nursing homes, home health agencies in a specific US city, and maybe later on anywhere in the world. Let's call it a Medicare locator. The development of an AI assistant should typically start with what we call a conversation design. A conversation design is a process of asking yourself who your users are, understanding what they will use your assistant for, and crafting the most typical conversations they are likely to have with your assistant. It's a very important step which will help you to better understand and define the purpose and usability of your assistant and will make the process of creating the training data easier and more efficient. The best way to start designing the conversations is to look into what things you already know about your potential audience. For example, you can work with a domain expert and leverage their knowledge of your user base. If your product has a website, check what are the main search queries your users use when browsing it. And if you have a customer support team, check what are the main questions they get. Information like this will help you define the most common questions your users may ask your assistant. However, if none of this information is available to you, you can also use a so-called Wizard of Oz approach. Talk to the real users as if you were a bot, write down the conversations they have with you, and use them to start developing your assistant. To get started with our Medicare locator, let's write down the most common questions we expect the users to ask our assistant. First good option could be, I need a hospital. Another one could sound something like, I'm looking for a nursing home in San Francisco. These two questions are already a great starting point to start designing an actual conversation between the user and an assistant around them. Let's write it down step by step. We would expect the users to start a conversation with a greeting, and it would make sense for our assistant to respond with the same. It's also a good practice to make sure that at the beginning of the conversation, an assistant tells the user what it is capable of doing. Next, it's very likely that the user will ask what they are looking for, a hospital, a nursing home, etc. If the assistant has all the details it needs to provide the best recommendation, it should proceed to finding a requested facility. Otherwise, it should ask for additional details, and once the user provides them, an assistant should go ahead and execute the search. Finally, a successful conversation will probably end with a goodbye message from the user and a polite response from an assistant. In general, conversation design is a challenging task, because in real life, conversations usually have way more back and forth interactions. Also, it's really difficult to come up with a large number of conversations that have different dialogue turns. That's why you should only rely on example conversations like this at the early stages of the development and give your assistant to real users as soon as possible. Now, let's use the conversations we just wrote down to start generating the training data for the NLU model of our Medicare locator. In the previous episode, we covered the Rasa init function, which we use to automatically create a Rasa project with the most important files and some example training data. We will reuse this project and turn it into our own custom Medicare locator assistant. This is how the project looks like. A data directory contains the training data files for the NLU and dialog management models. You will also need things like model configuration, domain, and other things, which we will cover one by one as we build our assistant. For now, let's focus on the NLU data. Inside the data directory, you can find two files with a markdown extension, nlu.md and stories.md. nlu.md is the file where you should write the NLU model training examples. Let's open it and see what we have inside. The file comes with some example training data used to train the MoodBot, which we tested in the previous episode. NLU training data consists of intent labels which start with a double hashtag, and some examples of how users would say that specific thing which start with a dash. From the conversations we created, we can see that in order to handle them, an assistant will have to understand 4 user inputs: greetings, facility search queries, inputs where the user provides additional information, and goodbyes. The examples we found in the NLU.md file already contain 2 intents which are relevant to our Medicare locator: greetings and goodbyes. Let's create some training data for the remaining ones. The inputs where the user provides the location information should also have an intent, which we will call inform. Now let's write down some examples of how users would provide their location. Last but not least, let's train our assistant to understand the inputs where the user asks for a specific facility. If we train the NLU model right now, it will only be able to classify the intents. But as you might have guessed, there are some important details, like location, that an assistant should extract and use later on when driving the conversation. To teach RASA NLU to do that, we have to label the entities as well. Entities are labeled by adding square brackets around the word which should be extracted as an entity and defining the label of the entity in the parentheses next to it. Let's label all locations in our NLU examples and provide them a label location. You can see that our examples have another useful detail, a facility type. An assistant should know what specific facility the user wants to find, therefore it would make sense to extract it as an entity too. Let's label the facility types as well. If you would like your assistant to understand other inputs, you will have to repeat the same process. Define the intents, provide some examples of how the users may say that specific thing, and label the entities. However, just like with any other machine learning problem, you have to be mindful when creating the training data. Here are some things for you to keep in mind. You don't have to write down all variations of a specific input to train an intent. Usually, 10 to 15 examples per intent is a good place to start. Obviously, the more examples you have, the better, but at the same time, you have to make sure that the data you use to train the models on is a high-quality data, that the examples actually correspond to the defined intents, and that they are diverse enough in terms of vocabulary and the structure of the sentence for your models to really learn and to start generalize on unseen user inputs. As a little homework, I would like to encourage you to spend more time creating the examples for the intents that we define for the Medicare Locator Assistant. You can also come up with a completely new intents that you would like the assistant to understand. And I'll see you in the next episode of the RASA Masterclass, where we will dive into the details of defining the NLU training pipeline. Until next time.